This is continuing the fight for religious liberty, so I want to invite him to the stage, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it when they get up here. State Representative James Frank is with us, and also Jennifer Allman from the Texas Conference of Catholic Bishops. If y'all come to the stage, and I'll tell our guests a little bit more about you. While they're making their way up, shameless plug, before you leave, don't forget, $20 insulated Texas Values tumbler. Keep that drink cold or warm on your way home. All right. So, Jennifer Allman is the Executive Director of the Texas Catholic Conference of Bishops. She oversees the day-to-day work of the Texas Catholic Conference of Bishops, including legislative activities, communications, collaboration management, legislative strategy, relationships with diocesan staff, and quite a bit more. Prior to being in this position, she served as Advocacy Director for Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston. Little H-Town plug for my Astros, who are in first place in getting hot and healthy when they need to. She has a master's degree in moral theology and bioethics and has completed the National Catholic Bioethics Center's Bioethics Certification Program. Mr. James Frank is a longtime resident of Wichita Falls, and he owns 2 manufacturing companies there. He's a proud member of the Texas House of Representatives. He serves as the Vice Chair of the Human Services Committee, and he and his wife have been married for 28 years. And he was the author of, let me make sure I've got this handout, the Freedom to Serve Children's Act. That was the religious liberty bill passed in 2017. This past legislative session, we've got information on that piece of legislation. So that is a large part of what we're going to talk about with Representative Frank and, we'll make a little room before we start, Jennifer Allman. So we will start with ladies first. Let's talk right on this bill. So House Bill 3859, what did I say? I'm looking right at it. 3859, I've only said it 1,000 times. 3859 is the Freedom to Serve Children's Act. This is the religious liberty bill you've heard us make some references to as it relates to the adoption and foster care issue, as it relates to religious liberty, as it relates to the government not punishing these entities that are faith-based because of their work that's faith-based on the adoption and foster care issue. So, Jennifer, the Texas Catholic Conference, to put it lightly, was heavily involved in protecting religious liberty on this issue and on this bill. Talk to us about why House Bill 3859 was so important to the Texas Catholic Conference.
Hello. Thank you. So, the Catholic Church has been providing orphan care, foster care, adoption services throughout the state of Texas for over 150 years. Yet in the last 2 decades, we began to start seeing a slow motion weakening of our religious liberty right, such that it began to feel like we were expected to check the very religious motivation we had for engaging at the door if we were going to provide services in certain communities throughout the state. And because of that, several of our Catholic charities had to really weigh their stewardship of resources and to say, if we're under threat of litigation repeatedly for just honoring our religious value and our belief in the traditional marriage between one man and one woman, in doing our child placement services, we might be able to use our resources in a better way by not engaging in this service. Well, that was a heartbreaking conversation for our Catholic Charities agencies to have, and some of them made the decision that they needed to close their doors. And we saw happening throughout the country. This was happening in California, in Pennsylvania. We saw this happening in Massachusetts, in areas where religious freedom was no longer free. And so because of that, we worked with Representative Frank and a whole coalition of partners, many of our other faith-based child welfare providers, such as Buckner, Children's Home of Lubbock, reaching out to them to say, hey, if we're experiencing this, you probably are too. And we worked very closely with Representative Frank to craft a bill for Texas modeled on how it had been done in some other states, but really trying to learn from those states where it might have been implemented for 5 or 10 years, and they had some lawsuits anyway, and some problems and some concerns. So we tailored our bill to try to make sure that we built the strongest protection possible, not just for the child welfare providers such as Catholic Charities and Buckner and Children's Homes, but for the individual foster parent. And I think that's one of the strongest parts of the bill that people don't always think of. They think of it as a provider bill about the agencies and the institutions, but it actually protects every single one of you if you answer the call to engage in the foster care system by ensuring that you're not required to participate in accessing abortion or contraception simply by answering the call to foster. And that's important because we see a very severe crisis and a lack of foster families in Texas. So we believe that this tool was a very important tool in the toolbox for recruiting additional individual families, faith communities to engage and help be a part of that solution.
Well, look, oftentimes that's what we'll hear by some people, right? They'll try to suggest, that Christians aren't doing their job when it comes to being pro-life and so on. You care about the unborn child, but what are you doing after that? But as a matter of fact, that is many people that are faith-based, that are Christians, that are care about these issues and are being involved in. So it can be discouraging for them to find out that, you have to check your faith at the door. You have to, compromise certain beliefs in order just to do something to serve other people in your state and our state that we care about. So Representative James Frank, this was your bill. I mean, a very important issue. Certainly important for you, and I know there's some things personally that relate to this that you care about. Talk to us about how important it was to you to pass House Bill 3859.
Well, it was obviously very important. We spent a lot of time, and really, the folks on the stage were very important in helping get that done. We went into session, and really we have a foster care, I hate using the word crisis all the time, but we don't have enough foster homes. And yet we have situations, we've had it in Texas in some cities, we have it right now, one in Philadelphia, where we have government saying, we don't have enough foster homes. By the way, religious organizations, y'all stay out of it. Unless you're willing to do what we say and agree with everything we say. Even though really in Philadelphia and the other cases, nothing that the cities or nothing that folks are attacking have anything to do with the welfare of the child. They don't have to do with whether or not Catholic charities or partners are finding great homes or finding safe homes. It doesn't have anything to do. The homes are they're willing to take any kid. They're not discriminating against any type of kid. They're just wanting to say, hey, we are going to train these folks. And frankly, and then obviously you have the abortion issue and others.
Is that one more better?
Yeah, this is the in and out on you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Y'all heard that.
We take care of our people.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, anyway, but at the end of the day, the reason that we filed the bill was for capacity. We were going in, we didn't have enough foster homes, we had kids sleeping on in offices, and yet we were doing many things as a state to make it more difficult, and we were trying to make sure that religious organizations could come to the table.
So hold on a second. You said there were kids sleeping on tables. I want to make sure people heard that. And I know we're getting late after lunch. What a great lunch, right? Chick-fil-A, I want to make sure offices.
I'm
not trying to correct you.
No, if I said tables, that
I didn't mean it that way. What I meant, right? No, but it's true that we had some very desperate situations that children were involved in that you were addressing. So tell us talk to us a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, we want to make it easier, not harder, for folks in this room and really everyone across the state. Really, that's why we call it Freedom to Serve Children Act. We want to make you free to come help children. We don't want to put up artificial barriers based on political motives. We want to make it easier to serve children in Texas, and so that's what we did. And actually, I'm very excited. It's still pretty early on, but Catholic Charities, Buckner's, and others have done a lot to try to increase the number of foster homes, because ultimately, it really is about the kids. It's not about the political show. It's about having more people able to serve kids in the state of Texas.
Yeah, well, and when you already have a situation where, call it a crisis, a concern, whatever word you want to use to describe, that there's a problem in being able to serve these children, you would think that having the opportunity, one way or another, that more people could be involved in the process, particularly when they're willing, that would be in the best interest of children. And Jennifer, maybe you can touch a little bit more on that, on what was happening in some of these offices, because I don't think people realize the reality of that, and that those, were not exaggerations, if you will, or they weren't isolated cases. There were real concerns in that matter.
Sure. I mean, I think one of the gaps in the system, and one of the biggest difficulties in the system, is placing the hard-to-place teenage kids. Lots of people want to help the sweet little babies, but that teenager who's been through an incredible amount of abuse and trauma and neglect, who might run away from your house, who might use language around your 5-year-old you don't want to hear, those kids are harder to place, and those were typically the kids sleeping in the offices. Meanwhile, Catholic individuals who wanted to foster were being told, if you're not going to provide contraception, we won't place a teenager with you. We'll give you the 5-year-old. We won't give you the teenager. And this teenager is now sleeping in an office. And so we saw that problem, and that's why our bill in Texas is, I believe, at the moment, Kansas may have added it, but we were the first state to put foster parents into the bill to ensure that this was really providing avenues for these children, and that was really important. I want to build on something Representative Frank said. You know, during the session, it got ugly, if you were watching, quite ugly. We were attacked pretty aggressively by people. And one of the common accusations was, this is a political stunt, this is bigotry and discrimination, and you're just doing this to beat up on, you know, couples who want to adopt. And, you know, I think the proof is in the pudding. Since the bill passed, we've seen expansions and programs throughout the state of Texas that have started only because the bill passed. A good example is the work we've done in what we call the St. Joseph's Ministry. Most people in the pro-life movement are very familiar with the Gabriel Project, where we in the Catholic Church help women who are facing pregnancy that's unexpected, and we provide great service through the Gabriel Project. Well, St. Joseph was a foster parent, and so we created the St. Joseph's Ministry completely after the passage of 3859 to launch a parish-based program to support foster families. It might be to recruit families, but it's also to do the important work of supporting the families who answer the call. Not everyone has the ability to be a foster parent, but the work of a foster parent is difficult and lonely. So knowing that your parish community is aware of what you're doing, is wrapping services around for your family and being able to provide that respite care, that tutoring, that additional mentorship, and just that phone call of support when you're dealing with these kids who've experienced such trauma is critical. And we launched that program after 3859. I've trained, at this point, I've done presentations all over the state, training hundreds of people in how to launch this parish-based ministry. There's 1,200 Catholic parishes in Texas. They all have this toolkit, which they would not have had were it not for 3859. And that's just the work of the Catholic Church. We've engaged with Upbring, which is a Lutheran program, Buckner, and Children's Home of Lubbock are all expanding services because they no longer have this fear and threat of litigation for simply living the faith that calls them to serve.
Representative Frank.
I just want to tack just a little bit. Yeah. I want to tack just a little bit because I think I learned something during this process of going through it, which is how to communicate with people that don't understand what religious liberty means. You can't simply say, hey, this is about religious liberty and freedom of religion, because many of the people that you're talking with and trying to get stuff passed with don't have that faith. And so one of the things we did a lot of, from the name of, you know, freedom to serve children, but we also flipped the script a lot in the discussions about discrimination. So, and asking, well, why are you wanting to discriminate against people of faith simply because they believe different than you? As opposed to having it asked the other way, why don't you want to be more inclusive? You know, seriously, so LGBT couples can adopt. That's fine. Why is it that you don't want a Muslim adoption agency? Why is it that you don't want a Jewish adoption agency, a Catholic adoption agency? Why can't Catholic charities only train Catholics? I'm not saying you wouldn't, but why, or train same-sex couples. We want everyone as part of it. And so I use, one of the things I use is a personal example, which, by the way, that works a lot better in other areas. But basically, my wife and I have 4 boys, and we adopted 2 boys out of CPS. And when we talked to CPS, I'm not young, and this was just over 3 years ago, and so we weren't going to do young kids either. Okay, so we said 8 or above. Boys and 8 or above. God told us 4 times, boy, boy, boy. That's what our house was set up for. And the question I asked is that I asked somebody. I said, "Am I discriminating against girls and babies because I have said my wife and I are willing to help in this way? Is that discriminating, or is that saying, please let me serve, but let me serve in my way?" Yeah. And so I think it's really important. I think sometimes we get mad and we get passionate about our issues, but we use the words that make sense in this room. And we need to use words that make sense to people that don't have the same background that you do to try to bring that up.
Well, and you know, with the amount of attention, scrutiny, conflict in some of these areas, I think it's important for us to challenge ourselves at times and just say, look, is there another way we could talk about this? Is there something else we haven't thought about on these type of issues? Because many of them are new, but some of them relate to principles that have been around since our country was founded. And maybe some people are not as rooted. Maybe they have come to the United States recently. Maybe they've just recently gotten involved in government and politics. And so they're just, we're almost maybe speaking a different language. And so, the words do matter. And I tell you what, they certainly matter on what's written in the legislation. And so that allows me to segue to the other question, follow-up question a little bit for Jennifer is, when you talk about these type of issues, when you talk about the life issue in faith-based entities and so on, a lot of times people ask the question, well, how are referrals handled? Talk to us a little bit about how the legislation addresses that and how these issues could play out.
Sure. One of the things that was very important in structuring the bill was to do it in a way that it could withstand future legal challenge, because the whole reason we were doing the bill was we were concerned about legal challenges. So we wanted to make sure that we talked to a lot of constitutional law experts and others in crafting this. So the referral section is crafted in a way that meets both the legal challenge test and, from a Catholic perspective, the theological test of cooperation with evil. In Catholic theology, we're not going to do evil, but we're also not going to cooperate if you're doing evil. And so that's why we don't fund Planned Parenthood. That's why we don't collaborate with Planned Parenthood, because any collaboration with them is still evil. And so we wanted to make sure that when we're looking at how to authentically live our faith as Catholics and Catholic charities, if somebody comes to us and we say to them, we don't believe, we believe that we should place children in a couple with a mother and a father, and you don't fit that criteria for us, that if we just say go down the street to this agency, we're still facilitating their placement. And so referral is important in order to withstand legal challenge, so we structured the referral in a way to put some distance between that. And so we refer to the Department of Family and Protective Services. The Department of Family and Protective Services has a list on their website of every provider in Texas. We made sure that the bill was structured in a way that the department is required to ensure that there is an alternate willing provider in each geographical region of the state, so that no person who wants to foster is turned away, but we are able to specialize, as Representative Frank talked about, in training within our parishes, in recruiting from our pews. Now, if somebody shows up at Catholic Charities who isn't Catholic and wants to be trained, that's great. We're happy to train them. But we train and we do placements for people who are in a traditional marriage. We don't place with single people because we believe that it's important to have the complementarity of a mother and a father for a placement in foster care. That's nothing against the heroic work that single moms and single dads do every single day, but we're taking a child who's been removed from their home because of abuse and neglect, because of problems of maybe a lack of a father figure or a mother figure or that nurturing that is necessary. So we want to give those foster children every tool in the toolbox, and that includes a mom and a dad.
Very well said. Let's talk process. Okay, for a minute. We could get into some of the very interesting and fun battles throughout the legislative process. And I will tell you, sure, there was a lot of scrutiny. And we talked a little bit about this earlier in the discussion about the business community and how they played a role on the privacy issue. But there was some chattering by some that they should boycott Texas if this bill was passed, and that passing bills that protect religious liberty would hurt our economy. So there was some things to navigate to get this process. But you have constituents just like other members do. So talk to us about how important it was that just for your district, and you don't have to speak for other people's district, just the importance so other people can understand it from whoever their representatives are, the importance of people in your district, your constituents engaging with you on this issue.
It's tremendously important, as you point out, that at the end of the day, I think a lot of people want to either talk to the bill author or whatever. You talking to whoever your representative is, for most of you in this room, I love you, I agree with you, but I don't work for you. Okay, I work for 180,000 people up in 6 counties in North Texas. You, to the extent you can, build a relationship. I don't care whether it's a Democrat, Republicans, who it is, build a relationship with your member, because everybody in the legislature almost wants to come back. Almost. Some people get frustrated and do that, but it is very important to hear from the members of your, in your constituency.
Well, and I think people lose sight of that, because you might have people that maybe you live in a district where you think your member's not listening to you. I do believe not to suggest that, there weren't predominantly Republicans supporting this bill, a lot of religious liberty bills, but I do think there were a few Democrats that got on board. I don't have their names in front of me, and so you never know. I mean, sometimes we may know a little bit more, we may have an idea, oh, that person's more likely, but you as a constituent could impact them, because they may see me a lot, they may see Jennifer, they may see, Representative Frank on the floor, whatever, but to his point, and sometimes you will see members do that. They will be on the floor and they'll say, look, this may be, unusual or whatever, but I have a lot of constituents in my district, and this is what they're asking me to do.
I'll tell you, I actually, on the floor of the House, I had a member that was very concerned about some of the very false AP reporting on the bill, and I literally, from the floor, called a leader in his area talking to him because he was concerned and couldn't explain it. So, yeah, it really does matter. The one thing I would say, I know we get angry and passionate about this issue, but the vast majority of members respond much better to reasoned, polite, intelligent arguments over berating. When you really think about it, most times if we yell at people, they tend to run the other way. And honestly, if your representative will do what you want because you yell at them, they're probably weak. And they're not, you know what I mean? And so the vast majority of the time, I think being respectful, I think we're supposed to do that as Christians anyway, but I think that tends to just be more effective. One thing I'm just going to add, this is really separate, but you mentioned collaboration. I was thinking as you were talking about passing, how many different people had a hand in this. This is not, I think it's funny that you put a name on bills, because it's not your bill. There's so many people. Honestly, Brian Hughes didn't have his name on the bill, and his staff helped draft some of the bill. We didn't let people know that at the time, but
it's too late now.
It's too late now. I shouldn't have said that. But there were so many people. Catholic Charities worked great. Buckner Homes, Texas Values. There were so many people that played their role. Sometimes stood down from their roles when it made sense and worked strategically together.
Well, and our good friend Scott Sanford, who's executive pastor of a church, was going to be on a panel. He's doing some very important with a new development at his church, or a building that's opening. Could not be here, but last session filed a bill very similar to this, and did not carry the bill in 2017, but was a significant part of it becoming law. But you got two chambers, you have the Senate involved in this issue. But you're right. And here's how I want to finish up too, because I know A&M's playing, your Aggies are playing. I know the Longhorns are playing a little bit later too.
Look at that number 12 shirt.
No, the Aggies jokes were told yesterday, so I won't repeat some of those. No. So I want to keep us too much longer, but last session, 2015, the Texas Conference of Catholic Bishops was very supportive and vocal of their support of the Pastor Protection Act. I know as we continue to see these new issues come up, there are movements, whatever, there seems to be more activity, and that's why we have some more of these specific laws, because we're saying, look, we have the First Amendment, but I guess people think somehow the rules have changed, so we got to make it real clear. Yes, in this situation, religious liberty applies. Yes, in this situation. So I imagine we're going to have to see that continue, but we have seen more, I feel like, more attacks on religious liberty. If there are an example or two y'all want to share, and I'll start with Jennifer, of just whether it's the overall climate or specific instances that you're seeing happen in the place you are as it relates to religious liberty.
I don't know if I can come up with a specific example off the top of my head right now, but what I will say is that throughout our ministries, we are continuing to see this viewpoint that the price of admission to the public square is to leave your religion behind. And it's the religion that motivates us to be in the public square. So as an integrated Christian, you can't leave it behind. And you can't leave behind what is at the essence of your soul in order to act and engage in the community. And so I think that, across the board, there's multiple little examples that you can give, but my larger concern is that it happens across issues. The very same faith that motivates us to take care of the child in the womb, motivates us to take care of the foster child, motivates us to take care of a child at the border. And as Catholics, it's an across-the-board respect and protection for the life and dignity of the human person. And we see people of all parties and of all persuasions telling us, we're so happy to have your faith on this issue, but on this issue, we think you're wrong. And I think, you know, we can certainly disagree, but we can still sit around the table and work together effectively if we find that common ground. And I think it's important that people understand that common ground is not about sacrificing or compromising your deeply held principle, but about saying within that principle, here's an area of agreement. And that's what I think Representative Frank did in focusing this bill on the building a diverse provider network. We said, this is who we are, this is who we're gonna be. We're not stopping you from being who you wanna be. We're just telling you we're not gonna participate in that activity.
Well, and I would imagine that from a legislator's perspective and a statewide perspective, that we're seeing legislators realize, okay, passed passenger protection in 2015. Okay, we passed Freedom to Serve Children's Act in 2017. Texas is still #1 for business. For some of those that might have been spooked by some of those, you know, arguments to suggest that having religious liberty would somehow hurt our state, you know, I would imagine you might, you know, as you see more examples, maybe more members or elected officials realizing, okay, I can vote what I believe in, and also I can see that it's helping and that it's not going to have some negative impact.
Yeah, no, I agree. One of the things you mentioned, people boycotting because of 3859, actually about 4 months after we got out of session, when it went in place, California boycotted state-paid travel to Texas, and you can see how our economy is shut down since that time. And, you know,
Where's Jonathan Keller at from California? Sorry, buddy.
No, I mean, you know, that our economy is just locked down because of that. And so I do think there's some of that, look, we live in a country where people are going to believe different things, but we've gotten to the point now where if you don't believe in God, then you can go in the public sphere and say, hey, I don't believe in God, God is dead. And that's fine. If you say God is alive and I believe in Christ, then you're shut down. And look, all of us have a faith. Not everybody has an organized religion, and everyone should be willing and able to share that faith publicly. But we're struggling with that as a country.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, is this the first time you've been an author of a religious liberty bill?
Yeah.
So you're 1 for 1.
I'm ready.
So, well, we are beyond our time, but about where we want to be on this panel, so I'm going to give a little bit back time of our audience, and we've got to be out of this building before too long as well. And so I've been looking forward to this all day. There's been a lot of talk about other issues that relate to a religious liberty bill, but now this one is about a specific example, to give you an example of the process, some of the issues that are in play, and also just one of the most current examples of how Texas is done, how it's leading, and how I firmly believe, and I'm sure you do as well, that it's making our state even stronger, and it will make us stronger, and not just our state, okay, but the people in it. This issue affects so many people, children's lives, and I think that's what continues to make Texas exceptional. So thank you all so much for your leadership on this issue. So. So I am going to get a couple of notes about housekeeping, I think, over here before we wrap up. Yes, please.